it's a pleasure to be here once again with these candidates. Let me quickly introduce them so we can get to questions so you guys can hear what they have to say. So we have, and I'm going to start all the way at the end with Arunan Arulampalam. He is CEO of Hartford Land Bank, previously Deputy Commissioner of Connecticut Department of Consumer Protection, and previously corporate attorney in the Hartford-based law firm of Updike, Kelly, and Spalisi, sir. Thanks a lot. All right, and I'll keep it short so we can get time. So next to him is State Senator John Fonfara. He served as state representative from 1986 to 1996. He currently serving in his 13th term as state senator representing the 1st District. He holds or has held positions on several committees, including Chair of Finance, Revenue and Bonding Committee, and the Energy and Technology Committee. And finally, former Judge Eric Coleman, who served as a state representative from 1983 to 1994, served as state senator representing the 2nd District from 1995 to 2017, and served as House Majority Whip in 1991 and Deputy Speaker in 1993. So how about a round of applause for our candidates? All right, so let me, as I shuffle my papers, let me ask that question that I'm sure you've probably answered 1,000 times already on the campaign trail. And it's a very straightforward question. And why don't we start at the very end with Arunan and move across. And that first question is, why do you want to be the next mayor of the city of Hartford?
1,000 seems like it might be an underestimation. First of all, let me say thank you to the organizers of this event, and thank you to Dr. Sekou for moderating it. And thank you to Faith Congregational Church, this historic church where we're in. I've been in this church a number of times. You know, my wife is a congregational minister as well at one of the sister churches. And Faith has been such a great sister church, has created such a great partnership. In fact, I think you guys are switching churches and preaching some Sunday coming up, but also such a leader in social justice and equity. I often tell people when I'm in congregations of faith, what we are talking about as mayor is physical transformations of our city and what that might look like in an economic system, in housing and education and inequality. But congregations like this are talking about spiritual transformations, which we cannot be the city that we need to be without that spiritual transformation. And so the work that you guys do at Faith is so important and so near and dear to my heart. My name is Arunan. I'm the CEO of the Hartford Land Bank, running for mayor. And I do have a canned response that I could give. But as I was coming in, Reverend Cleo handed each of us these prayers, and I got a verse that is one of my favorite verses from Matthew, the verse, "The city on a hill cannot be hidden." And it speaks to me each time I read it in so many different ways, so many layered ways. But I'll start here for tonight. The verse in Matthew doesn't say a city on a hill, or a city with the right redevelopment plan cannot be hidden. A city with the right mayor cannot be hidden. The city with the right relationship with the state and federal government cannot be hidden. It says a city on a hill because there's something unique about lifting people up from where they are and showing them off. And let me tell you, there is so much light and power and potential in the people of the city of Hartford. And I believe in our residents. I believe in the city, in each of our neighborhoods, and what we could be if we work together and if we can lift up our city and let that light shine. All of the talent, all of the entrepreneurship, all of the creativity that we need to be a great city can be built right here in the north end of Hartford and in the south end of Hartford and communities across this city of Hartford that have seen decades of disinvestment but still carry all of the potential and the greatness to be something unique. And I'm running for mayor because I want to create those pathways. It's what I've done as CEO of the Hartford Land Bank, where we take vacant and blighted properties from the city of Hartford, but instead of just redeveloping it ourselves or handing it over to big developers, we train Hartford residents. We've created this program that's the first of its kind in the nation, where we train Hartford residents to redevelop these properties, connect them to capital to be successful, so that as we're redeveloping neighborhoods, as we're putting money into neighborhoods, they're going to Hartford residents to be the source, the backbone of what's possible in the future. It's something that I've tried to do as a resident in my neighborhood, where we have the only single-family house on our street in a neighborhood with a 7% home ownership rate, and invested in with our family. We have five young kids. who are going to public school in this city because we believe in what this city can be. We are bought into what this city can be, and so many of you are as well, and that's why you're here. But I want to be a mayor who fights for you, who tries to lift up what is already possible, what is already here in this city of Hartford, and I look forward to talking about that tonight.
All right, thanks a lot. Senator Fonfara. I think they're already on, maybe. Yeah, okay.
Is that better? Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and thank you, everyone, for sponsoring and holding this event tonight. I think this is like our 10th forum, something like that. Starting to forget how many. Pastor, I thank you for opening up the doors to your church for us here, and for all of you, for Jeffrey and Fernando for moderating, and not moderating, but for leading us into this tonight, this evening. My name's John Fonfara. I'm a state senator. I was mentioned in the introduction. My line is right around here in terms of my Senate district. I represent about 65% of Hartford, and that's all of the South End, most of downtown, Frog Hollow, Parkville, and then up on the east side of the North End. Hartford Current for years would say Fonfara represents South Hartford and Wethersfield, but I represent a lot more of the city than that. And I grew up in Hartford, born and raised in Rice Heights Housing Project in the Southwest End, Moylan McDonough Schools and Bulkley High. And I have fought for and advocated for the city of Hartford for all my time in the legislature for the bulk of my adult life. And I love this city. My parents at 99 and 98 years old are still here. Why am I running for mayor after all my years in the legislature? Because what I believe Hartford needs most, I can't do from where I am in the Senate in the way I believe I can as a mayor. And what is that? Too many of our neighborhoods, and this one is sadly ground zero in terms of increasing poverty and reduced or almost no opportunity for so many who live in high poverty communities. And I don't believe City Hall, city government is on the right path in terms of addressing the issues that need to be addressed. I think we are pretty much in city government operating the way we did in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And I believe the mayor of Hartford has to be different in terms of the focus of what should be done. And what is that? Our educational system, and I don't just say the school system, I believe the education system, because we have ceded the responsibility of education almost solely to the school system. But for the first 5 years of a child's life is the most important 5 years. And what we get right there will mean so much to that young person in the rest of their life, in terms of their income, in terms of their capacity to enjoy the quality of life that so many in this state take for granted. And I believe in terms of skilling up our residents to command a better wage. This is one of the poorest neighborhoods of Hartford. And I'll get into that, I'm sure the opportunity will allow me in greater detail as we move forward. But I believe the mayor of Hartford could do so much more in changing the path of the neighborhoods that are in decline, where poverty is increasing, and frankly, where most of the gun violence is taking place. It's in those high poverty census tracts of our city, of which we are one in today. So I'll close there, and I thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself.
Thank you. Senator, I said Senator, Judge Coleman.
Thank you, and thank you for the opening question. I also want to thank the organizers of this event. And Pastor, I bring you greetings from Metropolitan AME Zion Church, my home church, right across the street, your neighboring church. Also want to thank Hartford Votes and the San Juan Center and BSL Education Foundation, as well as the Clay Arsenal Neighborhood Revitalization Zone. Directly responding to the question, I want to be the mayor of Hartford because like my fellow candidates, I care a lot and love Hartford. I care about Hartford and I love Hartford. And on top of that, I think I have the experience, the background, the empathy, the know-how, the ability to get things done in order to help Hartford. And it is a very difficult thing for me, a person who's been public service oriented for most of my life, to sit on the sidelines and to see some of the things that occur with respect to the city of Hartford and not want to do anything about it. I don't want to be a Monday morning quarterback. I don't want to be a spectator. I want to be directly involved in the development of policies and programs and services that are going to be beneficial to the city and to the residents of the city. I reminisce about when I first came to Hartford, and Hartford at that point in time was a very exciting place to be. Downtown was vibrant. There was a very engaged corporate community which promoted and practiced corporate social responsibility. There were a number of attractions, including sports franchises like the Whalers. We've always had a very attractive arts, culture, and entertainment community. G. Fox and Sage Allen were the featured retail establishments in downtown Hartford. All of that, and on top of that, while we had gang activity back in the day, we had nowhere near the frequency and regularity of senseless gun violence that's occurring today. And I think that is a priority concern for me in wanting to become mayor and to try and address the issue of public safety in Hartford. Also, the schools need to be improved. And we need to pay not only attention to the schools, but we need to pay attention to the development of our young people. And we need to take advantage of every opportunity to put them under the influence of responsible adults who can impart to them important community values like respect for elders, respect for authority, respect for human life, and also to engage in character building and leadership development and work ethic and other very important traits that we hope our young people have. There is a concentration of poverty in the city of Hartford, and that most certainly needs to be addressed. I think we'll get to the point in the discussion where all of us will be able to provide some details about how we would like to address that. And I certainly have my thoughts and ideas, which I am eager to share with everyone here. So thank you for the question.
And thanks to all three candidates, and most importantly, you guys knew when to stop, which is a good thing. So as we continue with the discussion, just keep that in mind. I want to encourage as much of a discussion or dialogue between all three of you as possible. Several of you have mentioned education as an important sort of issue in the city. And certainly as an educator, I'll be starting classes next week myself. Classes are starting soon here in the city of Hartford. One of the things we know is that Hartford has many unfilled teaching positions, in the city. So the first question I want to throw out there is, what can be done to attract and to retain high-quality teachers?
So I'll take a stab at that question first. I have a written proposal, which is my view for what needs to be done in order to improve the Hartford public schools. And the teacher shortage is a great concern, and there are a number of reasons for the teacher shortage. Not the least of those reasons is that there are greener pastures. Some of you may not know that the teachers in Hartford work more hours and are paid less than all of the other school districts in the capital region. That in and of itself is somewhat of a disadvantage or a disincentive for teachers. But what I would propose is to address compensation for teachers, and particularly for those teachers who opt to reside in the city of Hartford. I think they deserve a 3% increase in their compensation in order to provide some further incentive for teachers to teach and to reside in Hartford. I think we need to take advantage of a market rate residential mortgage assistance programs and give teachers the opportunity to buy homes in the city of Hartford. Compensation and benefits need to be increased for Hartford teachers, but in order to recruit, I would continue the current superintendent's initiative to recruit in Puerto Rico and the Caribbean, and because so many of our students are black and brown, I would also extend those recruitment efforts to the historically black colleges and universities in the United States.
Thanks a lot.
I think that so many of us know intellectually that it's hard to be a teacher. For me, my mom was a teacher, and I saw it each day when we first came to the United States from Zimbabwe in the late 80s. We survived off my mom's salary of at that time, $19,000 a year. And every night she'd come home bone tired, exhausted. And so I saw it each day. I don't think I fully appreciated it until COVID hit and I became an impromptu teacher. Me and my wife became impromptu teachers for 4 little guys who all go to school in the city of Hartford. And each day tried to hold ourselves together while just teaching these 4 little kids. And I think every parent during that time realized how underpaid teachers are, how hard teachers work, and what a unique skill it is to be able to command a classroom and to impart knowledge on our kids. And as I've talked to teachers and our campaign, we held a happy hour for educators across the Hartford school system, just to tell them, look, we're here with you, we want to hear from you, we want to build a relationship person to person. What's really clear is that so many of our teachers feel under-supported right now. And they feel like their concerns aren't being listened to, they aren't being met, that members of the Board of Ed, that members of the mayor's staff don't spend time in schools, walking through schools, getting to know each school in our district. And so first of all, I'm a parent of kids in public school. I've got skin in the game. I'm gonna be really active and involved in those schools and hearing from teachers person to person, because we've lost a lot of really great teachers in the years during the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, people who are veteran teachers who've taught in these school systems for decades and who know a lot and who care so much for these kids. So we need to first stave the bleeding and make sure teachers feel supported, that they're supported both in their salaries but also in terms of the morale we build in our school systems. And then recruitment efforts need to start early. People are starting to recruit out of college earlier in the year, and so when we start recruiting late in the spring, as we understand what staffing levels might look like for the next year, it's already too late. And we know each year, year after year, we're going to have to recruit a large number of students. And so we've got to build relationships as a district with our HBCUs, as was mentioned, and with schools that have teachers coming out, potentially teachers that coming out that are able to relate to kids in Hartford. But we've got to start that recruiting a lot earlier in the cycle. And then we should look at as Judge Coleman said, recruiting in other countries to backfill vacancies. But there's a lot of really good teachers, potentially really good teachers coming out of schools right now, and if we can start recruiting them earlier on in their senior year of college, I think we can, and build those relationships, I think we can get a lot more here in Hartford.
Senator Fanfara.
Certainly compensation is a factor, there's no question, and I think if we want to attract and retain teachers, then competitive compensation has to be a frontline issue. But I think overall, the conditions in which teachers and paraeducators experience in the classroom, where right now so many children are entering kindergarten unready in Hartford, particularly in our neighborhood schools. Magnet schools, they're okay, not great, but in our neighborhood schools, Sanchez, I could name 6 or 7, sadly, where the entering in the state requires every kindergartner to be assessed when they enter. And if you looked at those scores, and I can provide them for you, it's unacceptable that we allow this to happen. There are 1,100 slots for preschool in Hartford that are being unused right now. 146 that the state took back already, not part of the 1,100. We have to, and a mayor can make this a priority, not just in terms of policy, but in terms of the voice of the mayor, to convince moms, pregnant women and young moms that formal preschool, quality preschool, will make such a difference in their child's life, beginning kindergarten, reading by 3rd grade, in which many of our children are not. Many are reading far beyond that, not reading far beyond that grade in the Hartford school system. Only 22% of our 11th and 12th graders in Hartford right now are ready for post-secondary life. 22%. That's what we are doing. We are essentially providing a workforce for low-wage employers in Hartford, for Walmart, for dollar stores. And when those young people figure out what we've left them with, is there any wonder that some, a small percentage, but some, end up in gang life and with a gun? We're responsible for our children. They are the future of our city. If we want to know where Hartford will be in 10 years from now, look at those scores. The cavalry's not coming, folks. I've been in the legislature for a long time. The federal cavalry and the state cavalry are not coming. This is our responsibility. And the role of the next mayor, whoever that person is, I hope it's me, but if it isn't, if they're serious about our future for our young people, to give them a life, many who are born into neighborhoods and families where their parents didn't get a good education themselves. And we expect them to be able to do what somebody in Over the Line in West Hartford does, maybe 2 parents with a college education who believe in education because it's been rewarded, they've been rewarded because of it. We have to accept children and families where they are and go to work. Ensure that every child in this city, and if I'm the mayor of Hartford, we'll have an Office of Education in City Hall that will go to work to ensure that every child is in preschool, every child is reading by 3rd grade, every student graduates with the skills to go to college or career. We have Prince Tech in Hartford, that no mayor has ever embraced that school. I went to the graduation at Prince Tech this year, and guess how many graduated in electrical? If you're an electrician, you're pretty much set financially. 3 people graduated, 3 students graduated in electrical from Prince Tech, a school that's right here in our city. It might as well be an Avon in terms of how our city embraces that school. We never have, and I will if I'm mayor. But in terms of attracting teachers, we'll attract a lot more teachers if people feel good about where they're coming to work. If you ask a cop or a teacher how are they doing, most will say, I've got 5 more years. What does that say about their enthusiasm about coming to work for us, for our children, for our neighborhoods? We can do better, and it starts in the mayor's office. It all depends on what we want from that mayor going forward.
Thank you so much. Really, really great answers to that question, and wide-ranging answers. One thing I was surprised that I didn't hear anyone really talk about growing teachers from within Hartford. There are lots of young people who could go into teaching who are from this city, and certainly that should be, on the agenda in terms of thinking about teaching. Yeah, Senator Fanfaro, I want to actually come back to you because you've sort of centered, I think, some of your comments in this next question to some extent, and also you, Senator Coleman. Certainly Hartford, like many big cities, is dealing with, gun violence as a problem. within the city connected to poverty and many other sort of challenges, joblessness. And so, there are many programs that attempt to do something about gun violence. And so my question here is, what would you do differently if you were mayor when it comes to dealing with the problem of gun violence in the city of Hartford? Yeah, I'll start with you. Yeah.
Firstly, gun violence is a symptom of our poverty. If you look at a map in Hartford, in our poorest census tracts, again, of which we're in one now, it's incredibly the correlation between those census tracts and gun violence. This is not a mystery. We always seem to find the resources when the plane crashes, but not before. I had a conversation with the chief of police about 1.5 years ago, and he said to me, we have the list of the 17 to 25-year-olds that are gangbanging involved in gun violence. We know their names, we know where they live. I said, Chief, there's a 10-year-old in Hartford who's going to be on your list in 5 to 7 years. What are we doing about the 10-year-old? This session, as a legislator, I got $2 million over the next each year of the biennium for Hartford Communities That Care and the Hartford Police Athletic League, 2 organizations that are involved in different ways to focus on 8 to 12-year-olds, which is an age group where you go from being a child to more engaged in things that can be less helpful in their lives. But we don't do much about that group of 8 to 12-year-olds in this city. And that money is given to them to focus on that group. But more immediately, Boston has a program called Operation Nightlight where they send 2 police officers, a probation officer or a parole officers, not to arrest, not to harass, but to check in with someone who's been involved in gun violence, either in the workplace or at home. And I think most of us know if someone's checking in with us on a regular basis, we pay attention to that. And apparently it has had success in Boston. There's a person who works at the Capitol. He is the clerk of the Senate, Mike Jefferson. Some of you may know him. He writes regularly on issues involving the black community. And he talks in this piece that he most recently wrote about re-engaging fathers in the lives of so many Hartford kids who don't have their fathers in their lives. And we don't work at that. Right. We don't work at, and I think a mayor can take on, and I will, as a priority of supporting fathers who, for one of many reasons, have disengaged in their young children's, and particularly sons' lives.
Okay, thanks a lot. And we'll get through more questions if we're kind of concise, so think about that. But that's all right. But great answers. Go ahead, Eric.
So
yeah.
I guess I'm not so naive as to believe that what we tried in, I think it was around 1994, very simplistic. There were a bunch of community leaders, including Larry Charles, who was the director at the time of the One Chain organization, Reverend Michael Williams, Kenny Green, who was a state representative at that time, myself. We held a press conference on New Year's Day in the parking lot of the American Legion, and we simply made an appeal to young people and others to just stop the killings. And miraculously enough, for a period of time, that appeal seemed to have an effect, and there was a remarkable decline in those types of incidents. That was very simplistic, and as I said, I'm not so naive as to believe that that kind of an approach is a long-lasting or an effective approach. We certainly didn't get to the point where young people and others are shooting one another in the broad daylight in the street. It's probably going to take a long-term solution. And I propose that we, on the short term anyway, have the assistance of maybe state police and show a increased police presence, and hopefully that will be somewhat of a deterrence. But on the longer term basis, the Hartford Police Department, in partnership with community residents, have to do a better job of preventing and monitoring the flow of guns and drugs into the city of Hartford. I think guns and drugs are at the heart of, or at the root of whatever is taking place as far as gun violence is concerned. So maybe with the assistance of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, maybe with additional assistance from Drug Enforcement Administration, we just simply have to do a better job monitoring the flow of guns and drugs into the city. In addition to that, I talked in my opening response about focusing on developing young people so that they have a certain set of values that will hopefully prevent them from making the decision to shoot one another. And then, as Senator Fonfara talked about, we need to get at the root causes. There's a lot of, not in this room, but in the city of Hartford, there's a lot of hopelessness and despair, and a lot of that has to do with economics. And so we have to do a better job of creating opportunities for employment, and that includes training, and give people the wherewithal in order to support themselves and their families, and so that they have some impetus or some incentive to look forward to another day and not jeopardize their life by doing violent things.
Thank you so much. Remember, concise. All right, go
I'll
ahead.
work on it.
I wrote it.
You know, we've been to a bunch of these forums where we talk about public safety and violence within our young people, and I've been to a bunch of these town halls that happen after these horrific acts of violence, and what always strikes me is how few young people there are. And one of the things I want to do as mayor is create a youth council, and I would, if I got elected, start this with my transition team, but to get engaged young folks in each school in our city around a table to talk about what would really move the needle, what would really appeal to young folks. I think a bunch of older folks from different generations who are still trying to figure out what a 16-year-old means when they say bet are not going to figure out what's going to move that person to not walk down that road of violence. And so if we want to understand young people, we should maybe ask them what they think every now and then. And that's something that I plan to do regularly as mayor. I also want to create an Office of Violence Prevention. We've got all these great, I was just at Compass Youth Collaborative yesterday, and Compass and so many other nonprofits are doing great work. And I think trying to collaborate, but it's really difficult for nonprofits to not work in silos, because that's kind of how they're set up. And then they compete over the same resources, they compete over similar populations. So we're going to create one Office of Violence Prevention that coordinates services across each of those nonprofits, coordinates with our school districts, because teachers and administrators often are the first ones to see the red flags when someone is at risk. Coordinates with our police department, and comes with a coherent strategy for each of the folks in our city who we think has experienced real trauma, has experienced violence, and is likely to offend because of that, and make sure that we layer on services to get to them early, to provide them the mental health resources they need, to provide them the access to the training and then to career pipelines that they need. And then we're going to keep our schools open at night and all summer long. We're going to create spaces for young people in the city to be safe and to just be young people again, to just be kids again. And for so many of our kids, when 3:30 comes and the school day ends and those doors close, or through the summer, there's nowhere to go. And they are just let out onto the streets with so many bad options in front of them. And I think all of us can relate to feeling like we've made bad choices. We've been at that stage in life where your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed and you make bad choices. And for so many kids growing up in this day and age in Hartford, the consequences of those choices are just so much greater than they are anywhere else. And so we've got to create those safe spaces if we want to rebuild the sense of the village here in Hartford, if we want to be the village that takes care of our kids. These are all our kids. They're all our children. And we should rebuild that sense and create safe spaces for them to be.
Bet. So I feel like I'm still young, right? Actually, let me come back to you. And again, I want to emphasize about being concise because I'd like to offer you an opportunity to respond to each other as well. This really is a dialogue. So, in terms of, I know you've got literature that lays out all of your programs. So, just give us a taste of it in your answers in that sense. So let me come back to you, Aruna. I want to talk about jobs because I think, this is something you also mentioned in your opening sort of comments. So, what can we do to prepare Hartford residents for the jobs of the future, right? And really, I think importantly, prevent people from being left behind. Start there.
Well, I think that there are a lot of jobs of both the future and the present that we don't create pipelines to in our schools. I mean, we don't really have shop classes in the way we used to. We don't have auto body shops in the way that we used to. And there are, there is a need for real employment within the licensed trades, within plumbing and electrical workers and HVAC folks and steel workers, and there's this population that is aging out of that field, and it's a perfect opportunity for kids for whom college may not be the right option to build a career in which you can earn six figures. Eventually you could get paid to essentially go to college to be an apprentice and earn a real income. So one of the things that I've proposed, and I've been endorsed by the building trades, I've talked to the building trades about working on a project like this together, is building an apprenticeship school in the city of Hartford for all the big developments that we are doing in this city to ensure that kids from Hartford are getting trained in those skills, building careers in those skills, and getting paid and earning income as we build those buildings. I think bringing more of that education into our schools, and not just Prince Tech, which is a state school. Although I agree with what Senator Fonfara is saying about embracing Prince Tech, but in each of our schools there are kids who might be better suited by a career in the trades. I think bringing coding into our schools, which provides kids a whole range of opportunities, whether or not they go to college. I've got friends who are in the tech industry, and they'll say, it doesn't matter whether you went to college. We don't care where you went to college or what your GPA was. The question is, can you do this job? And too many of our kids can't. And if Hartford kids get the jump on other kids by knowing coding early, then we are perfectly set up to attract those jobs, both to attract those jobs to Hartford, because we'd have the most qualified workforce, and also to set our kids up for success in the future.
Right. Good.
So I guess one of the objectives I would have as mayor is to expand our workforce development initiatives and make a greater effort to make all Hartford residents job ready to the extent that it is possible to do. And that might mean some remedial education, it might mean some substance abuse counseling, it might mean just some work ethic, just inspiring a greater work ethic on the part of some people. But we do need to expand our workforce development initiatives. And there needs to be some marketing activity on the part of the city of Hartford to make it plain to manufacturers or high-tech industry representatives that Hartford is a place where we have a workforce that's ready, willing, and able to fill their jobs and to perform them extremely well. We are sort of ideally located between New York City and Boston. We can work that to an advantage. And then specifically, at Brainerd Airport, there are pilot training schools that I don't think we take advantage of and we don't direct our young people to. There are aviation-related schools, including jet engine mechanic training programs that I don't think young people in Hartford are invited to often enough and aren't taken advantage of often enough. Those are very high-paying jobs that I think if we directed some of our young folks to, could turn out to some very worthwhile careers for young people in Hartford.
Thank you, Senator Fonfara.
Let me just preface what I'm going to say with none of this stuff is like that. If we want to rebuild this city, we want to give opportunities to our residents of Hartford, we have to commit to it. And it's not going to be something, if I said to you, I will fix this problem in 1 year, don't believe me. Don't believe me. But if you're serious about it, and we have to be serious about it, then firstly, it is education. If a young person in Hartford doesn't feel good about their education, the chronic absentee rate in the city of Hartford for schools is criminal. And we are dooming our children. And then we expect, well, why isn't this person looking for a job? And so there's an element of investing in a young person even before they reach the age to seek a job. And we're not doing that. That's number one. Number two, this last couple of years, I've gotten money for walk-in manufacturing facilities, one on Park Street, one on Albany Avenue. The one on Park Street is open. The one on Albany Avenue will open in a week or two or something like that, so that people from the neighborhoods don't have to get on a bus, don't have to go across out of Hartford. They're right in their neighborhood. They can be, learn about manufacturing. And I got additional money so that it becomes a clearinghouse. So if you may not be interested in manufacturing, but there may be 10 or 15 other skills and opportunities of employment available to you right in your own neighborhood. This session, or last session, I pushed Eversource to create a program for more Black and Latino linemen. There are very few Black and Latino linemen working for Eversource. If you're a lineman at Eversource, that's a $100,000 a year plus job. And that program is now in operation at Capital Community and training young people for those jobs. More importantly, this past session, I passed the first in the state initiative to invest in high poverty, low opportunity census tracts for three things. $50 million a year for 6 years running. This isn't just Hartford, it's in other places of the state where there's low opportunity and high poverty. It's workforce development for mixed income housing to break up the concentration of low income housing. And thirdly, for investing in the neighborhood, because too many people, when they start to do better financially in Hartford, do what? They leave our city. You hear about it all the time, particularly in communities right here. He got out, or they got out. I don't want our people to have to leave as they do better. There's a woman by the name of Mayoral Carter. She lives in the South Bronx. She's written a book, You Shouldn't Have to Leave Your Neighborhood to Live in a Better One. And that ought to be our initiative. I can say a lot more about this, but you've been told many times to be concise.
Thanks a lot, thanks a lot. And remember, if you have questions, you can write those questions on a card, and we've got questions in the card, so that's gonna happen at some point. So we've talked about education, policing, and jobs. And obviously, you guys need to differentiate yourselves, from each other in order to get people to vote for you. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to differentiate yourself. So you've listened to each other on those three areas. What's different, you think, about your position on any of those issues compared to any of the other candidates? You're not all the same, are you? Ronnie, go ahead. Like you reaching for the mic or you reaching for your water? Go ahead.
I'll grab the mic. and this isn't a criticism, but I think that we, to John's point, we really need a full-scale solution that can address each of our kids here in Hartford. And so, I think that there are a lot of pieces to that solution. And take Brainerd Airport for an example. I mean, there's 20 pilots that get trained out of Brainerd Airport at a time, and even if half of them came from Hartford, that would be 10 people. But the building trades, and I want to be really clear about this, could be a pathway for so many kids in the city. And that's not a criticism of anybody else's idea, but it's something that I think we really need to focus on, because there is going to be just a huge opportunity for employment in the building trades. And all of these folks who have been in the building trades, who became apprentices because their uncle or their father or they had some connection to get in there, a lot of them are getting to be 55, 60, 65. They're going to age out in the next few years. And if Hartford doesn't step up and try to be a huge part of filling that gap, filling that hole that we know is coming, I think we're going to miss out on a huge opportunity.
All right.
So when I was a member of the legislature, I fought with the building trades for I don't know how many years, but it was a good number of years. And for whatever reason, they were resistant to doing apprentice sign-ups, as Senator Fonfero might describe, in high poverty, low opportunity census tracts. And in order to sign up for apprentice training, you would have to go to some remote area like Pomfret, Connecticut, which many individuals from Hartford had no way of getting to. And I had to draw the conclusion that the building trades were not really serious about providing employment opportunities for anyone other than legacy members of the building trades. As far as opportunities at Brainerd Airport is concerned, I think that those opportunities, however few they may be, are not being taken advantage of, and any missed opportunity like that is a missed opportunity for the advancement and the growth of young people in Hartford.
Senator Fonfero.
I'm not going to critique anyone else's positions. I think that this should be a campaign of ideas and convincing those in this room who aren't with a candidate already that, one of us is more eligible. But I will say that what I think is missing when we talk about, and by the way, there are hundreds of millions of dollars available in job training. There's more money than you could even count available for job training. But what's missing is there are a lot of young people in Hartford who don't believe that that world is for them. I'll give you two examples. The apprenticeship program that I talked about in terms of becoming a lineman. The CEO of Capital Community, Duncan Harris, I had breakfast with him some months ago. He didn't know my involvement in creating that program, and I didn't know his involvement in implementing the program. He said, John, we go out and recruit to get people to join this program. We go to barbershops, we go to other places in Hartford. We are having a hard time recruiting. Someone else, Mark Scheinberg from Goodwin University, Capital Workforce Council came to them and said, we have a grant for 15 people, job training in manufacturing. They only got 5. So there is a step before the job training that we need to focus on in order to make all those millions be available in our city. And that we're not doing right now.
Yeah, and I put a heavy emphasis on differentiate, not critique, and I agree with you on that about not wanting to necessarily critique. I've got a ton of questions that people have thrown at me, so that's sort of a signal that be concise. But and speaking, economic development obviously is an important issue, for this city. And some people feel that downtown development has received more of a priority than neighborhood development. Do you agree with this? And if so, what would you do differently? Why don't we start with Senator Coleman, then move down?
I most definitely agree with that sentiment. Most of the development effort that has occurred with this administration has occurred in the downtown area, and almost to the detriment or the exclusion of the neighborhoods. I would focus as mayor on more development in the neighborhoods, not to the exclusion of downtown, but there definitely has to be more development in the neighborhoods, including housing and infrastructure. Infrastructure including an upgrade of the sewer systems that have resulted in a lot of the flooding and sewage backup into the homes and businesses located in the North End. So there needs to be also support for small businesses, technical and financial support for small businesses in the neighborhoods. And there just simply needs to be a lot more attention paid to the neighborhoods, and that would flow into our interest in employing people from the neighborhoods as well.
Yeah, I live in a neighborhood. I live right near the corner of Park and Broad Street, and Park Street was once this thriving center of Latino businesses and culture in our city, and now it's 40%. In that part of Park Street, 40% vacant. And so many of the businesses that exist there now are cell phone stores and vape shops, and it's not really a small business corridor. And I think as mayor, I want to focus on trying to build one small business corridor, one corner, one intersection in each neighborhood, and building out from there, rebuilding small businesses that are owned by Hartford residents. It's amazing to me that in the entire north end of Hartford, you can't get a cup of coffee from an independent coffee shop. You can't get a sit-down meal, really. And the lack of community that creates when you don't have the kind of amenities, when you don't have small city centers in each neighborhood, to me, it conveys a message about what we think about people who live in this neighborhood. And it's really important that we have economic development, but not just dollars thrown at problems and streetscapes. Real businesses, small businesses owned by Hartford residents that can thrive and build wealth that stays here in our community, that gets reinvested in our community, and that continues to grow jobs and grow our economy. And what I want to do is to create a capital fund within our city that Hartford residents can tap into to start a business or build home ownership within our formerly red line neighborhoods, so that we have the capital to be able to create small businesses, to grow small businesses, to grow home ownership and housing in the area around it, and to rebuild communities in which that wealth stays within the community instead of getting funneled out to some big box store that comes into our neighborhoods.
I don't want to see Hartford have a rivalry, if you will, or one community pitted against another. I think many people in this room remember downtown Hartford very fondly when G. Fox and Sage Allen's and other stores were here, and people came from all over to visit and shop there. Those businesses are gone. And the development that has happened in downtown Hartford has been more about building a neighborhood, and there has been a neighborhood built there. There are many more residents now. And I hope Hartford residents from this neighborhood and beyond can someday aspire, if they want to, that would live there. Downtown has to diversify racially, economically, and we're not heading in that direction. But regarding our neighborhoods, they have not received anywhere near the attention from the state. By the way, most of that development that has happened downtown has been because of significant investments under the Malloy administration, somewhat under the Lamont administration, not as much. But we have not seen the same kind of investment in our neighborhoods. And until we reduce our poverty in those neighborhoods, businesses chase the customer. And if they see that the customer is poor, you're going to see, as Arunan just said, cell phone stores. What was a restaurant is now a dollar store or a cell phone store or a nail salon, because that's what the average customer in that neighborhood can afford. As incomes rise, and we invest in the neighborhood so people don't leave for somewhere else once their incomes rise, you'll see businesses come, you'll see growth in the neighborhood. Arunan's right. Park Street, Albany Avenue, there's not one upscale African-American restaurant. There's not one upscale Puerto Rican restaurant. That's wrong. But that's a function of our poverty, and it's a function of a belief, in some cases rightfully, in some cases wrong, that we're not a safe place to come from the suburbs. I want the suburbs to bring their millions and spend it here in Hartford businesses, dine on Albany Avenue, on Park Street, on Franklin Avenue. They're not doing that today. And support the businesses that are here. And I believe a lot of people from the suburbs want to come here. It's up to us as a city to create the environment where they will come and create employment and support the people who own those businesses that today they struggle to make ends meet and to survive.
Can I appreciate the sentiment behind that. Could I challenge that a little bit? You know, I'll take Dunn's River, for example, and I pay, I think, restaurant prices to get a restaurant quality meal, but I get it out of a styrofoam box, and you know, you go and sit and eat it in your car. I think the economics are there. People, you know, purchase food. There's more purchasing power even in poor communities than we sometimes think, and I think that there is some level of bias that comes from businesses that have been successful in other communities about how much purchasing power folks in poor communities have. But for things like food, I think people are already paying restaurant prices for a lot of those establishments, and if we could give them the grants to create the kind of spaces that look like community spaces that allow for, you know, I've talked about creating something that I call a glow-up grant, that businesses that have been successful in neighborhoods for 10, 15, 20 years have the customer base, but just don't have the sit-down capacity to create that community feel. I think those restaurants be really successful, and you know, frankly, if you can add a liquor license on top of that and serve a little bit of wine at night, they might even do better than they're doing right now. But that's not criticism, the underlying sentiment of what you said. But I do think there's that possibility now, and businesses right now run locally that could be really successful in our neighborhoods.
Well, I'll just say that when you look at the data, this neighborhood and surrounding census tracts, the average household income, not per capita income, is $20,000. Household income. That's how deep our poverty is right here. And until we commit to changing that and giving people more opportunity in terms of their skills through education and intense, determined, committed effort to skill up our residents to command a better wage right here in Hartford, not then reward another town for that. Because people will go where they feel their family will be well served. There's a school in the neighborhood. We have a job to do. This will be the hardest, if I'm elected mayor, it'll be the hardest job I've ever had. And I've had a pretty hard job right now. But that's the commitment that is required. They're all connected. The businesses and the school system and our neighborhoods and economic development, they're all interrelated. And until we commit to that fully, we will not see progress in our city.
Senator Coleman, you look like you wanted to say something.
I do. I just wanted to comment, and again, not to critique or criticize anyone else's comment, but it occurs to me that if you're not investing in neighborhoods because they're poor neighborhoods, there's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy that occurs. If you're not investing in poor neighborhoods because they're poor neighborhoods, those poor neighborhoods are going to remain poor. It would be nice to really commit to doing something transformational along the commercial corridors in the North End, Blue Hills Avenue, Albany Avenue, North Main Street, maybe even Barber Street. We've got downtown, and I guess this was your initial question, a baseball stadium, we got a convention center, we got a science center, we've got Adrian's Landing restaurants. West Hartford has Blueback Square, and I suppose it's beyond anybody's imagination that those kind of developments could occur in the north end of Hartford or in Parkville. And I simply asked the question and would ask the question as mayor, why not?
So certainly a part of the redevelopment that has gone on in the city of Hartford is making housing available. But a lot of that housing has been targeted towards higher income people. So a number of the questions that have been put here talks about this issue of housing, and in particular affordability of housing for low and moderate income people in the city of Hartford. So I guess the question is, how many residents, Hartford residents, have actually been able to purchase any of this new housing that's been built? And to what extent can you as mayor help Hartford residents gain access to quality, affordable, decent housing in the city?
Sure, I'll go ahead. I think I probably started by saying that I live in a neighborhood with a 7% home ownership rate. The city of Hartford as a whole has a 24% home ownership rate. And in so many of our neighborhoods, like mine, like this neighborhood right here where we're sitting, the home ownership rate is in the single digits. And so over 90% of residents in neighborhoods like this are paying their hard-earned dollars out of their pocket every month in rent, and that rent is rising steadily. If you're working a minimum wage job, your first $100 probably don't cover, for first 100 hours in the month, probably don't cover your rent in neighborhoods like this. And a big piece of that is because we have no control over the housing stock within our city, because so many of the landlords in neighborhoods like this, in a lot of our neighborhoods, over 50% of the landlords are out of town, not out of the city of Hartford, outside of the state of Connecticut. They live in New York or New Jersey or Florida, and they are making millions off of our most disadvantaged and marginalized citizens. And when I was at the Department of Consumer Protection in the Lamont administration, I worked with the Attorney General's office to institute the very first lawsuit of its kind in the nation against a landlord who owned a set of apartments right down the street here, Emmanuel Koo, and he had these folks who were living in incredibly deplorable conditions. And in this city, we have so many really, really bad landlords, slumlords, who are taking hard-earned dollars from hard-working citizens and keeping them in conditions that we should not accept in this day and age, in 2023, in one of the wealthiest states, in the richest country in the world. And I think I saw Corey Mackey at some point. Shout out to GIA and the incredible work they've done organizing tenants against slumlords in the No Slumlords campaign here in the city. But we need to stand up for our residents who are really disadvantaged, because affordable housing, when we talk about affordable housing as this overarching term, that includes slumlords like Emmanuel Koo. It includes these people who are making millions off of the industry of affordable housing while refusing to accept the dignity and humanity of the people who live within their units. And so we need to get control of our units within the city, and we have the tools to go after them already. We have blight ordinances, we have tax liens we can put on these properties. We can take these properties, and then we can work with the Attorney General's office to set up a lot more of those lawsuits to take profits right off the table of these slumlords who are making millions off of citizens in our city and using those dollars to invest in those same houses and restoring those houses. We have those tools to go after people like that aggressively, because the core of our affordability crisis in the city is not because we have a lack of government programs around housing in the city. In this neighborhood, in my neighborhood, over 50% of the units are deed restricted affordable housing units. It's not because of the lack of government sanctioned, government sponsored, subsidized affordable housing units. It is because of the lack of control that's created an economic system in which Hartford residents have no control over their economic future, have no control over their own destiny. And we've got to flip that economic system on its head if we want to have housing that allows people to build wealth, to be able to thrive, live and thrive in this city.
All right, thanks a lot.
I think the city of Hartford has to be about the business of creating affordable housing, whether it's home ownership or rental units. And we do have a blight ordinance in the city of Hartford, which I don't think goes far enough because it doesn't have the kind of teeth that it needs to have in order for it to be effective. If a property is abandoned or dilapidated or poorly maintained and exorbitant rents are being charged to the tenants of that property, the blighted properties ordinance in Hartford allows that property to be cited, and at worst, it allows a fine to be imposed. In New Britain, just recently, New Britain engaged in the process of eminent domain to take a property located in New Britain that's similar to the property that I described, abandoned, illegal activities occurring, poorly maintained, exorbitant rents, owned by an absentee, out-of-state landlord. We need to address our blighted properties ordinance so that it will empower the city of Hartford to take such properties. Just compensation is always a requirement under such circumstances. But after doing that, we need to transform those properties into habitable, decent places where an affordable rent is charged and residents of the city of Hartford can pay those rents and move into those units and live comfortably and decently.
It's true that we have neighborhoods in Hartford, one that Aruna lives in right here, where the percentage of home ownership is under 10%. But we don't have a policy to change that. We have a policy to provide no down payment assistance. But there are many people, some in this room, I venture to guess, who are paying more in rent than I pay in my mortgage. But are we doing anything to help facilitate those families to own a home? We are not. We can grow the percentage. Hartford has the lowest percentage of home ownership rate in the state. 25% of our housing stock is home ownership. We're not going to build more single-family home neighborhoods. I wish we were a bigger city and we could. But when I was younger, most three-family homes in Hartford had the owner on the first floor. Many today do not. We can change that. We can change that. I passed legislation 2 years ago to establish the definition of community development corporations, where from the ground up, from the residents and the businesses, the local businesses would begin to take ownership of their community. In most poor communities, if not all, the vast majority of properties are owned by someone else that doesn't live there. Community Development Corporation can change that. And there are people in this room who have started that process right here in this neighborhood to create a Community Development Corporation so that, as an example, if a building is foreclosed on, the CDC would have a relationship with the bank or the financial institution that has that mortgage to get first right of refusal, so that now, instead of having somebody buy that building in an auction and and you wake up the next day and you don't know what you're living across the street from because that property owner doesn't care. But now with a CDC, you can have a development arm that will renovate the building. If they feel a need to sell it, they can sell it to an approved property owner. There's so many things can come from that Community Development Corporation, and with that designation, of which people in this room have started that process, is $50 million, there's now $100 million in state financing to support the work of the Community Development Corporation. So, and I will finish by saying, until we grow incomes, that has to be a commitment of the city of Hartford going forward. Until we grow incomes and create a different balance. You know, Hartford used to have 170,000 residents. Today we have 120 on a good day. We can create more housing, which shifts the balance away from the landlord, from the property owner. Right now, in this country, we're 4 million units short of where we should be. That has given market power to property owners over renters. In Hartford, we can shift that by building more housing and giving the tenant more market power than they have today.
I agree with all of that, and I just want to expand on that because a lot of times people wonder why we don't have more home ownership in the city of Hartford. And Senator Fonfair is right. If you can pay the market rate right now for a 2 to 3 bedroom home, 2 to 3 bedroom apartment in the north end of Hartford, which right now the HUD market rate in the poorest zip codes in Hartford is between $1,500 and $1,700 a month, then you can afford a mortgage on a home that's based on the federal interest rate somewhere between $250,000 and $325,000. And so if we could build homes in that, that's kind of a donut hole that's missing in the city. If you went right now on Zillow and tried to find homes that are in that price range, you might find one. You probably won't find any that are meant to be home ownership, owner-occupied homes in the city of Hartford. And it's because of the economics of this system. Because if you take a home that has been blighted for a number of years, and you are some out-of-state renter of that, landlord of that property, and you make really minimal investments in that property and rent it out, you can immediately get 3 times a mortgage in income. But if you want to be a homeowner, if you want to put the investment into making that a home, then, or if you're a developer trying to turn that into home ownership, and that's something we do at the Land Bank right now. We are working on building 12 owner-occupied home ownership projects in the next year, which will be the biggest expansion of home ownership within that band in a very, very long time in the city, sadly. And 12 is too low of a number. I think it needs to be in the hundreds eventually every year. But if you're trying to redevelop that home, it costs more than you can responsibly sell it to a homeowner for. And so if nobody steps in and takes that gap, and for the first 12, the Land Bank ourselves are putting in $1.3 million to eat up that gap, and that's not completely sustainable, but for a couple of years we're gonna try that because we have some state dollars that are eventually gonna run out, and we have to spend it. But if nobody steps in and eats that gap, then home ownership is not going to be possible in the city of Hartford, and we will be stuck in this cycle. And 20 years from now, mayoral candidates will be having the same conversation. So I'll give Senator Fonfair a shout out. 2 years ago, he and I worked on a bill to create a home ownership trust fund in the city of Hartford, and we got it on a bond agenda, or on the bond bill. We haven't gotten it on an agenda yet, but it's something that I hope we get to work on again next session. But I think that we need to be aggressive about getting those dollars to change the economics to allow for more Hartford families to own.
Thanks a lot. One of the things you guys didn't mention, and it is a question that's actually asked on the card, is that we also have a problem with people being evicted in the city of Hartford. So how would you address that issue as mayor, for example, Senator?
I think as mayor, the mayor can direct the city departments to better publicize what protections and what rights tenants have. And in particular, on the statutes, there is a requirement for good cause evictions that many people may not know about. If you are elderly or disabled, or there are some other categories, and you cannot be convicted unless it's for a good cause. There's also, if you're a tenant living in a property that is ill-maintained and basically uninhabitable, there is a procedure in housing court whereby you can pay your rent into court, and the landlord will be required to address whatever the issues and the condition of the rental unit are before that money is actually turned over to the landlord. There is a Fair Rent Commission in Hartford, and tenants need to be better informed regarding the process of the Fair Rent Commission. There was a bill at the legislature, which I don't think passed, but House Bill 5003 restricted the increases in rent from 1 year to the next to 4%. That's what the bill would have done. Unfortunately, it didn't pass, but that would have been a considerable protection for tenants who are resisting rental increases. The city departments can also direct tenants who are facing eviction to sources or places that might provide some legal advice or legal assistance to them. Those are the things that I believe that the city can do.
Okay. Would you like to respond to that question?
Sure.
Either of you?
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of credit to our current mayor, who with the ARPA funding I'm not positive about this number, but I believe it's around 1.5 million into Greater Hartford Legal Aid to support tenants' rights in those proceedings, and that's something that needs to be a sustainable. That's a one-time source of funding. It needs to be a sustainable and long-term source of funding to provide legal assistance for tenants. No.
They don't have space for that. Never have space for housing.
Who doesn't have space for housing?
Legal aid.
Legal aid.
Never have space for housing.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, I think that's something that a mayor needs to take a real leadership role in ensuring that folks who are facing those really scary decisions have adequate legal representation, because oftentimes landlords are able to.
Yeah. Yeah. So it seems like we're starting to move to that point where we're going to, where people from the audience want to say, hey, you guys are making my job hard here. What are you doing? Don't make this job hard. I got a little bit more time. Make it easy. So what we're going to do at some point, we're going to actually have one of the mics go here to take questions from the audience, and we're going to do that. Richard is moving. Yeah. So we do it, and so maybe at some point the two of you can share. We can share the mic to sort of to do that and invite people up. Now remember, take it easy on the moderator. Be nice to me. Be nice. All right. So if you've got questions, maybe sort of go towards the mic if you want to ask a question, or to do it that way. I've been told we can go a little past 7:30 and they won't turn the lights out on us, so we should be fine with that.
Okay.
And I got the
hello,
cards.
everyone.
Yeah.
My name is Yesenia. I am community leader. My English is really bad, but I apologize. But I have some issues. Housing. First, when the landlord buy or sell the property and don't tell to the tenant, and then they have issue with the housing because housing don't want to pay what the new landlord wanted. First. Second, the bullying that landlord made to the tenant because they want it out, even they have the rate of payday. Like their own day, they don't have issue. They want it out, they have bullying. Fair housing don't help. Legal aid don't help. And 311 can't help either. So that's the issues that a tenant and the landlord have together, because we have bullying landlord and abusive tenant.
Thank you so much. Any response to her comment?
I think what you just said at the end of your comment is the most important. That, and why I'm a Democrat and why I believe that government can play an important role in many things in life. It's not a place for everything, but this is one example of it where you have, and this exchange is not unusual. Never played out in our forums, but it plays out in real life. We have good tenants, you have good landlords. But there's not a process of supporting good tenants and good landlords. And I've spoken about this briefly in other forums, that's what I want to do, is to have that process where we support, and maybe there's an association of good tenants and good landlords. And I think we should throw the book at bad landlords. I think we should have a process for notifying tenants of somebody. Maybe we should have a certification process. Requires more thought, but a certification process that if you commit to certain ways of operating as a property owner, that you're certified by the city. So now it's sort of like the Better Business Bureau for landlords or for tenants to be able to know this landlord has been certified. And that would help with respect to good tenants as well, because it's true that landlords, property owners have a difficult time. There's a woman who she has a duplex in the north end of Hartford. Her tenant stopped paying. He was selling drugs out of the house. His rent was 3/4 of her mortgage. And because of COVID, she could not evict him. And she's now in arrears on her mortgage. And so this problem of where good tenants are facing unfair situations by the landlord, or landlords or property owners are facing unfair situations, that is certainly a role for a mayor to create an environment that supports the kind of outcomes that we want. Because I'll just conclude by saying this. A tenant who may not have the knowledge, the resources to defend themselves adequately, that's where government can play an important role in protecting that tenant. But also that landlords, we want the kind of ownership in our city where local Hartford residents can own property and have income come from that property and not feel like the deck is stacked against them.
Thank you. Amy, come to the mic if you want to ask a question. Sure.
Good evening. My name is Delicia Arnold. I live in Clay Arsenal. I do have a multifamily house, which I do not rent out. I live on one floor because I have evicted several tenants. Thankfully, I can afford to pay my rent. But my question to you guys are, the ordinance that are currently on the book, such as noise, right here at 19, I believe it's 1984 Main Street. I live on Mill Avenue. From the springtime to like November 15th is a fight out here every night. I have to go to work in the morning. I mean, there has been so many times I have said, you know what, I should leave Hartford. I lived in Boston for 23 years, which is a major metropolitan city. The things that go on here would never occur. The trash cans are still out. Trash pickup was last Friday. That homeowner would have had a ticket. How would you enforce the ordinance to make people want to live in Hartford, for people who can afford to live somewhere else? I mean, sometimes I say I should be a slumlord, just rent out my apartments and just live the good life. But no, I was born and raised on Blue Hills Avenue. I happened to live, go to undergrad at Northeastern, stay there, came back, and I was so disappointed. You talk about your children go to neighborhood schools. I would never send my children to neighborhood schools. I have a 15-year-old, I have a 19-year-old who's at FAMU, and I have a University of Hartford graduate. Thankfully, they went to Capital Prep under the Dr. Perry era. And then my baby boy, he goes to SEVA. I cannot comfortably send my child to a Hartford public school. So we really have to address our education process, because you're not going to get young people to want to come here and bring their children. So my number one question is ordinance. Because these people at this apartment building, it's crazy. You drive down here anytime after 7:30, they're fighting. You can hear, I'm in the middle of Mill Avenue, I can hear them, I can't go to sleep. Something has to be done. Something absolutely has to be done. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I know you don't have a mic. You gotta
Well, I'll just say you're talking about quality of life in our city. My former aide used to call me Senator Quality of Life. Until one day, she had a neighbor whose behaviors, and she's very progressive, loves Hartford, and she called me up and said, this guy's doing X, Y, and Z, parking his car on the front lawn, this and that. I said, oh, is that a quality of life issue? I couldn't agree more with you. We have an ordinance on noise. We have blight ordinances. It's about enforcement, and it's about, does the community value those things? And I think we've tipped the balance, unfortunately, where so many residents of Hartford have accepted a behavior that you described would not happen in Boston. But I believe most people want to have the kinds of, I'd like to think that maybe in the beginning we have to enforce more, but that over time that we can get to where it becomes a norm. I see people throwing garbage from their car out the window and driving on the street. But you know they would never do that in West Hartford. They would never do it in West Hartford. And that's, you know, this city is good. We're like the Statue of Liberty, right? Bring us your poor, bring us your tired. And we should love this city because it has loved us. So many so many families coming here from circumstances that are far worse than most of us endure. In Hartford, we will always take the poorest. We will always accept that responsibility. But to want people to stay here, a true test of a neighborhood is that the children who grow up there want to live there when they have a chance to decide where they're going to live. And right now, we lose that fight. Yeah. So many children now are living in the suburbs that grew up in Hartford. And I think a mayor, more than probably anything else, can set that tone and create expectations of what kind of city we're going to live in. But you have to want to take the heat to do that. I will take the heat, yeah. But you'd like to know that the residents like yourself will stand behind the mayor to say, we support you in that.
Okay, we're running short on time.
Part of the problem with the situation that you described is the shortage of city employees. You may be aware that the police department numbers are down. The police are understaffed. Housing code enforcement officers are down. Those staffs need to be replenished and up to an effective level. And you know, I suppose the three of us as here have something to say about fully staffing police department, housing code, building inspectors, and the like, so that the noise ordinance could be properly enforced. All of it.
I appreciate you sharing that. And well, let me start by saying, please don't leave. Everybody that cares about the city, everybody that's invested in this city, we need you guys. And we need to change the culture of this city. I see those quality of life issues every day. I mean, I've got a 2-year-old who wakes up at 5 o'clock each morning, and he'll give me a report on all the noise he heard in the middle of the night that woke him up, and the people who were screaming. I mean, I've broken up a fight on my front lawn at 2 in the morning. There's something that gets communicated to Hartford residents when we've got trash on our sidewalks, when we've got broken up roads, when we've got street lamps that are busted out, and when we have noise complaints. And I'm not talking about just loud music every now and then, like yelling and noise complaints in the middle of the night. There's a message that gets communicated about the level of dignity and respect we have for Hartford residents, and investing in changing our quality of life, getting people who can go around neighborhoods who their sole job is to take trash off of sidewalks. citing those landlords. And I think that good landlords in this city are the ones who hate slumlords the most, because you see what it does to your own property value, you see what it does in your own neighborhood. But citing those and having our housing code inspectors really going after those landlords for the trash that brings in rodents, for the noise that they have in their parking lots at night, and going after them for that. Those small things are so important, and I will be a mayor who is on top of each of those small things, because I don't think we can get people to dream big about what the city can be and what we are and who we are, each of us as individuals, until we can get the small things right. And if we want people to believe in government, we've got to do the small things right. So that's something that will be a priority for me.
Really, really thanks a lot for those answers, and also thank you for the questions. I'm looking at the clock, and I want to make sure the lights don't get turned out before we leave. So what I want to do now is I actually want to give each candidate the opportunity to make their case in about 2 minutes for why, make their closing arguments about why they should be mayor. And I think we started on it first, so why don't we start this way and go that way this time to close out. Go ahead.
All right. I want to be the mayor of Hartford because I think Senator Fonfara expressed there's a certain frustration on the part of legislators who fight for resources and dollars and programs for the city that they represent. And we've done that for years. The city, or the programs, the services, the resources, the money gets to the city level, and the legislator no longer has much control, authority, or power over how that money, resources, and programs are implemented. And so I think, I'm certain that if I were to become mayor and had a direct authority over the resources that come into the city, I would rely upon my good judgment, the experience that I had, the ability that I demonstrated in order to get things done, in order to make sure that many of the conditions and concerns that Hartford residents have complained about are adequately and effectively addressed.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for this opportunity. This was, for me, one of the most interesting forums I've been to.
None that I've done, though, right? Okay.
So, look, I think it's said that if you want to know where a person's going, look at where he's been. And if you want to know what kind of mayor I'll be, what kind of senator I've been. And, some people say we're going to lose you in the Senate and we're going to lose a lot. Well, I appreciate that sentiment, but the same skills that have made me a good senator will give me the opportunity as mayor to use far more instruments, far more ability to affect the issues that I feel are critical in our city. The poverty of our city is hurting us in ways that most don't know. City Hall is managing the symptoms of our poverty, not tackling the underlying cause of those symptoms, whether it be blight, whether it be crime, whether it be gun violence. All the issues you're here tonight, those are symptoms of our poverty. And as mayor, that will be my focus. I'm not the most social guy in the world. I will have to do more than I do now. I accept that responsibility, but I'm gonna work. And I'm gonna have a team of folks that are gonna work and measure me by my success after 4 years. If I don't have more kids in preschool, measure me by that. If we don't have many more kids reading by 3rd grade, measure me by that. If we don't have more kids graduating with the skills necessary to go on and work, measure me by that. And if we don't reduce poverty in our highest poverty neighborhoods in this city, measure me by that. I'm willing to put that metric on myself. That's how confident I am about my work. I've proven it as a legislator. I'll prove it as your mayor. But I won't be the beneficiary of that. you all will be the beneficiary of that and those that come after us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for sitting with us through this. This has been really great. I don't have a long legislative history. I think I've got some experience and some executive experience that I bring to the job that's unique from my time in the Lamont administration, helping oversee a government agency. And I think that's a really transferable skill. But I'm not here to make an argument about experience. I'm here to make an argument about the future. And throughout this entire forum, I've been watching this cute baby here in the front who's got amazing parents, and I've been in that situation of trying to shake the bottle and listen to what's going on at the same time, and you guys are doing a great job. But I think about that kid, and I think about all of our kids across the city, and the city that they are going to grow up in, the city that they are going to inherit, the city that they will hopefully grow old in, build families, build homes, build middle-class lives, or maybe even better, and grow old in. And you deserve a mayor who's going to fight for the future of this city every day. I've got skin in the game. I've got a family who I'm raising here. I understand the challenges we face day to day, but I also understand in my heart how much potential we have, how much opportunity we have in this city, how great each of our residents is, and what we can do if we work together. And I think I've got a plan to get there. And I'm going to be a mayor who works with every single one of you, who brings as many voices to the table as we can have to rebuild this city from the ground up, the city on a hill, to build power from within the people who live in this city, within the institutions of this city, within the neighborhoods of this city, to uplift ourselves and rebuild a future from the people who are here, who have been here for generations. I appreciate you guys being here, and I would love to be your mayor.
Thank you so much from all three candidates. Thank you. So we want to have a moment for the pastor to come up and say a few words. And thank you so much for having us here tonight, this evening.
Thank you all so much for being present here. I want to say that about 3 years ago, when I first got to Hope Congregational Church, I was greeted with a gang in the parking lot, and I was really concerned about that. Did we call the police? No, we didn't. But we just observed for a while. And after a while, I believe that they observed us and how much we cared for our property and how important it was for us to have church here. And so it was through that observance, I believe, and also it ended up getting a person to provide security, but through that observance in terms of how we were caring for our property, picking up trash or whatever was around, the people started to pay attention. And no more, after about a year, I no longer saw that gang anymore. And so I just say to you, what I heard today was hope. And hope is a very, very important tool. And what I've heard from all three of you, and even from those who were listening, is that we have a tremendous amount of hope. And when you have hope, you can do anything. But my question for all three of you, when one of you becomes the mayor, can you envision yourself hoping and working with each other? Praise God. Praise God. Praise God. Then we can envision ourselves working with you as well. And so we're thankful for all of you. Thank you for coming. And hopefully we will continue to lift up hope and do what we can to make things right and so much better for all of us. Amen and amen.